As we move into this next part of the plenary, I am incredibly honored to introduce our next speakers for several reasons. One, because they're peacemakers after my own heart. As a person that's working for the Presbyterian Peacemaking Program, I'm learning more and more about what it means to be a peacemaker. And these two authors, speakers, have been teaching me more and more about this. They've been helping me understand what it takes to do the work of peacemaking. Both of these speakers, you know their incredible books. Our first is Sharon Pearson, who has written an incredible book, Reclaiming the Gospel of Peace, Challenging the Epidemic of Gun Violence. I would love to make this required reading in the Presbyterian Church. And it's a book that talks about the epidemic of gun violence. And this is something that we need to be paying attention to, so we are honored to have Sharon with us today to teach us more about what it means to address the issue of gun violence. And of course, Jan Arnow, our peacemaker, our local peacemaker, our resident peacemaker, who's written an incredible book. And we know this book. Have you had a chance to go out and pick up a copy, for one, of both the books and be able to get them signed and have conversation about the books? Have we all done this? Okay, I'm taking that to mean yes, right? Come on now, I know it's the afternoon and I know it's after lunch. But let's build up for our next two speakers as they will continue to teach us what it means to be people of peace and teach us what it means to do the very important work of calling out the empire of gun violence. So without further ado, our speakers, Sharon Pearson and Jan Arnow.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here. I flew in from Connecticut, and I want to tell you a brief little piece about myself to give you some context of where I came to be involved in this work. I'm a Christian educator. I've been in that just about all of my life, but I live about 20 miles from Newtown, Connecticut. One of my friends and colleagues is the children's minister at Trinity Episcopal Church in Newtown, and that congregation lost one of their children on that day in December, Ben Wheeler. And then I had the privilege several months after that to gather with some of the children of that congregation, their Sunday school teachers and their parents, and with another colleague, we painted with those children for a while. We didn't talk, we just painted with our hands to allow them to express what they could not verbally say about the pain that they had been caused that they didn't understand. These were 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and even some teenagers. A lot of the paintings were dark. There was no light shining through for most of them. But since then, I, perhaps just like all of you, have listened to hundreds of stories in our neighborhoods, our schools, and in the news in which more blood has been shed because of a gun. We've heard already this morning we say, how much longer, O Lord? How much longer? There's a cry in the wilderness, how much longer? And Rachel is weeping for her children. In 2014, there was a gathering in Oklahoma City of about 300, mostly Episcopalians, that gathered to talk about what can we do as a faith community to stem the tide of this epidemic of gun violence. How can we as a church have a united voice? Because if faith communities can't unite together in a cause such as this, what can we unite over? I wasn't able to attend that event, but I followed it via social media and all kinds of things like that, and then as in my travels saying, why didn't other people follow this? They did not know that this event occurred, and the prophetic witness that many from around the church gave about gun violence and what it is doing to our society. And a piece that really hooked me soon after was Gary Hall, who is the former dean of the Washington National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., said, he gave a sermon right after Sandy Hook, and he said, "I believe the gun lobby is no match for the cross lobby." He said those words 3 years ago, but those same shootings continue to plague our hearts, minds, and the nightly news. I've done lots of workshops about how do we talk about gun violence in our congregations. And in conferences, many folks will come up to me and say, "I'm not coming to your workshop because I don't want you to tell me that I can't carry a gun." And I said, that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about gun safety. We're going to talk about what are the rights of all of us to live a healthy life, to feel safe in our communities. I'm not going to tell you you can't own a gun, but I'm going to tell you what are the odds of what might happen if you have a gun. And we've heard some of those statistics already this morning. I'd like to share with you a little piece that was written by Jim Curry, who is the retired suffragan bishop in Connecticut. And he wrote, "As Christians, I think we have a toolkit of resources that is both obvious and underutilized. We are people of prayer, faith, scripture, and symbol. We know that God's own mission is ultimately a peace-building mission of reconciliation and restoration. Jesus himself is our peace and the one who puts us on the mission path to be peacemakers. There's no easy solution to all of this, and so as an educator, I understand the importance of providing factual and experiential information to people, to children, to youth, and adults, in order to create change. And I believe that change needs to happen in our congregations. So I had permission from a number of folks who attended that conference to compile what they wrote about, for those who were advocates to talk about how they engage their congregations to do action and advocacy, and others that I knew around. So I decided I could use my position working for a publishing company, my writing and teaching experience, and the context I have through the church-wide organization of being able to put all these things together. So Reclaiming the Gospel of Peace is focused on 4 pillars. Education, which involves stats and data, which we've heard a lot today. Advocacy, how can we be a voice in the pulpit for that? Our prayers, yes, but where are we taking a stand in voicing where the gospel stands? What does Jesus say about turning the other cheek and proclaiming the good news that we are called to be peacemakers, to love God and to love our neighbor? Liturgy. How are our liturgies helping form people to be peacemakers, not just in the prayers of the people, but in going forth out of the doors, which is really the mission field? And then pastoral care. How are we caring for those who have mental illness, who are homeless, jobless, those children who need our help, perhaps opening our doors that are maybe empty during the week for after-school programs and early childhood education? In all of the stories I've heard, I return to ask those who listen to the stories, including the presenters already today, where is your story in the story you are hearing? Where do you see God in those stories? What causes you to pause and reflect on your previous assumptions? What cries out to you and what calls to you? So later on in my presentation, I'm going to talk about 4 ways that we can do that. We can proclaim the gospel in sermon, in teachings, adult study. We can sustain through being a witness. What are the stories of witnesses? We've heard lots already here today. We're all witnesses. How can we share our stories, our own personal stories? How can we reclaim that gospel of peace? The responses. What can we do? And I will share some of those actual things that different communities around the United States are doing. And then the work. The work involves praying, being active, and not sitting on the sidelines. We need to be able to change the narrative of what is going on. And we have a scriptural narrative that is laid out before us of creation, sin, judgment, repentance, and redemption. We can, as the speaker earlier said, in throwing stones, they can be stones of peace instead of violence. We can reclaim that so that we don't have to tolerate school shootings, mall shootings, theater shootings, sniper shootings, workplace shootings, temple and church shootings, and urban neighborhoods where it is not safe, and even suburban neighborhoods where it is not safe anymore. Final word from Gary Hall. He says, "Enough is enough. As followers of Jesus, we have the moral obligation to stand for and with the victims of violence and to work to end it. We have tolerated shootings too much. It is time to put our faith into practice and to proclaim the gospel of peace that Jesus gave to us." Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. I wanted to tell you that I really don't think we have a problem with violence. In the nearly 40 years that I've spent in this field, in the 2.5 years I spent doing the research for my latest book, In the Line of Fire, Raising Kids in a Violent World, I don't really think we have a problem with violence. I think we have 1,000 problems with violence, and we're dying from 1,000 small cuts every day. You know, if a doctor said to you, "You've got a problem," and then walked away, you'd think, well, wait a minute. Is it my knee? Do I need to get my knee replaced? Is it my pancreas? Do I have pancreatic cancer? Is it a mental issue? What's the deal? No, you have a problem. You would not know what to do. But if the doctor had told you, well, you have an adenocarcinoma with infiltrating ductal type 8 out of 10, stage 2A, T1, tumor is 33/4 of an inch across, N1, the cancer has spread to 1 to 3 lymph nodes, no distinct metastasis, grade 3, poorly differentiated, strongly positive for ER/PR, mitotic score count 3, tubule formation score 3, nuclear pleomorphism score 3, and your total score, you would know what this was. This is breast cancer. In fact, that was my breast cancer. And I found out everything I needed to know about every part of my breast cancer, so I knew what to do, right? So when we say to our community, you got a problem with violence, whoop, too big. It's way too big for us to grasp it and to step in. So we need to break it down into small parts so people can feel that they have a place to go to start working on solutions. You know, studies have shown that closer ties mean better health. That's one reason I'm really happy that this conference is taking place, because it means that people are getting together. They're strengthening their social web. So some of the studies are very interesting, I think. There was one animal study where there were mice in a jar. I never thought in my life that I would be saying the phrase mice in a jar, but here we are, small opening at the top. They could only get out one at a time, and the food was on the outside, okay? The competitive feeding situation made their blood pressure go up unless they were from the same litter. They still tried to get out, but their blood pressure remained the same. There was another study, this one in the Journal of Poultry Sciences. You read a lot of interesting things when you're doing this kind of work. This group of chickens was injected with neoplasm to encourage carcinogenic growth. After injected, they were returned, some to their old established place with the pecking order intact, and some to a new situation. Where do you think the growths occurred more? In the new situation. When they went back to their old place where the pecking order was established, they had almost no carcinomas. There was an Appalachian study where there was more absenteeism and sickness among those who had few or no supportive family members in the community. Upstate New York, in a place where everyone in town went to the same church, there was a third less occurrence of cancer, and so on. So my question is, excuse me, why do doctors look at organs and not our networks? Unfortunately, they do the standard Western thing, and they say, what kind of illness does this person have? Instead of saying, what kind of person has this illness? And we can do the same thing for communities and for our community. We can use that same model to address the illness in our community. So we now look at what kinds of problems of violence does this community have, when we should be looking at what kind of community has these problems of violence. So, thank you. Do we really want our kids growing up in this culture of violence, perpetuating it into the next generations at an ever-increasing rate? I used to say, everyone has a place to step in. Now I say, everyone must step in. Because if you don't, then we're going backwards, not forwards. We're not even standing still, because the problems, and I say problems, are enormous and growing. Nobody has to do everything, but everybody needs to do something. And Gandhi, I'll just close with this, we have other things to do today. Gandhi said that happiness is when what you think and what you say and what you do are in harmony. And I hope everyone takes that to heart and pulls your own personal thoughts and actions together for the good of the community. Thank you.